The March 14th Des Moines City Council meeting is now called to order. Councilmember Harris, you have the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record show that all council members are present. Do we have any correspondence that has not previously been received by council?
No, Mayor.
Right, thank you. It's now time for comments from the public. So we'd ask that you please keep your comments respectful and recognize that any person speaking or acting in a disruptive manner will be removed from the meeting. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and your city of residence. Do we have anyone signed up? All right, thank you. The first person signed up to speak is Semso Imsik. Go ahead and come on up to the podium. Yeah, no worries.
I need to push this. It's on, okay.
There we go.
Yeah, my name is Semso Imsik. I have a property on 240th and 16th Avenue, and I was listening to news when President of USA, Joe Biden, said we're going to have a food shortage and seeds shortage and fertilizer shortage and everything. So I have a big health problems, and my daughter have a big health problems, So I would like to have some chickens and animals on my property and vegetables. So I'm here to get some kind of permit for at least 6 months, to plant vegetables and to have some animals because, I have experience with food shortage from my country. I'm from Bosnia. And was a food shortage and medicine shortage, in my country, people who had health problems, they died really fast, So I'm really worried for me and my daughter, but President Joe Biden said if we have food shortage, tomorrow, and my daughter doesn't have medicine and no healthy food, So I'm here just to ask you, to let me grow vegetables in my backyard and to have my chickens. I have really good property, fenced property, and neighbors' houses are far away, and my chickens not gonna bother anybody. So I'm here just for that, I don't need any help, I never in my life asked for any help. I just need you to let me grow up vegetables and to have my chickens for healthy food for my daughter and for me and for my family.
Thank you, Mr. Imsik.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're not allowed to have conversation. It's just you're giving your input tonight. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. Next, Chuck Coleman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and staff. For the record, Chuck Coleman, Redondo Beach Drive South. Speaking to you tonight representing the approximately 400 voters and members of the Redondo Community Association. On the agenda tonight, under new business, item number 1 is the property tax levy lid introduction. While no action is required on this subject tonight, we wish to bring your attention that the Redondo Community Association is very supportive of any efforts made to improve public safety in our community. We support our police department and particularly the efforts of our police chief. We participate in police advisory committee, attend and host police support events, and actively advocate for public safety initiatives. In recent numerous discussions, we have been told that the funds from the levy lift property tax increase will be used for public safety. We note that on the agenda item, it does not state this anywhere in the narrative. In fact, at the bottom of page 2, the narrative states that the revenue can be used for any purpose. And while it is not a requirement to state the use of the funds, page 6 states it's generally a good idea. This levy lift property tax increase is supported by the members of the Redondo Community Association on the condition that the funds are used to support public safety initiatives. We request a written plan with the public input to be developed clearly stating the uses of these funds. This can be accomplished via the Citizens Advisory Committee or the Police Advisory Committee. We have time to accomplish this task before this measure is placed on the November ballot. Please consider our request in your discussions and help us improve public safety in our neighborhoods and help us deter criminal activities in our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman, and I think you will get some more details during the discussion portion of the meeting when we get to that item. Thank you. Next up, Karen Schartman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council, Interim City Manager, and staff. My name is Karen Schartman. I live on Des Moines Drive South. Soundview Drive South. I am here also representing the Redondo Community Association. I'm here to discuss the proposal to move to a biennial budget for our city, driven by our shared commitment to effective financial management. I've had 36 years of experience in finance. I've worked as a CFO for large organizations, and I have had firsthand experience implementing budget processes for one-year and multi-year processes. I applaud the city's efforts to focus on process improvements in this critical area. While a biennial budget presents compelling advantages, including the potential for efficiency and the alignment with long-term planning, it also introduces some significant challenges that do require careful consideration and specific skill sets. There are two things that the city needs to focus on to be successful with this. The first is putting a focus on the long-range planning process. The second is improving financial reporting practices. Both of these things are foundational to be successful if you're extending the budget horizon beyond 1 year. In our view, a long-term planning process is critical whether you have a 1-year or a multi-year budget. It's especially important for any organization like the city that does make long-term investments. So you're making decisions multiple years out in the future. So you need a plan that really guides you. It's not a detailed budget, but it's a plan that guides you on how you're going to achieve your financial targets. Timely and insightful financial reporting is critical in any context. Today, as environments are changing rapidly, it's very important. When you extend your budgeting timeline beyond 1 year, it becomes paramount because what you're looking for is to make sure you're not missing any signals on trends. The time to get ahead of financial risks is vital in the process. I spent some time looking at the city's financials. I also looked at our neighboring jurisdictions around what are they doing, what are we doing, and I see some opportunity to improve timeliness primarily, some opportunity on insight. So I would urge the city to focus on these two things with a really good foundation in long-term planning and timely financial reports, which, you know, as I looked at our neighboring jurisdictions, there is a lot of variability, but a best practice seems to be, so today in March of 2024, we should have a 2022 comprehensive financial report out. We should have financials available for the fourth quarter of the prior year. But focusing on these things will be a really critical foundation, I think, in any context, but certainly in considering a move. Please call on me if I can volunteer assistance, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schartman. Okay, it's now time for our committee chairs to report out on some of the meetings that they've been involved in, and we're going to start with Chair Mahoney and the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you, Karen. That was sound advice. Appreciate that. Obviously, we created the Finance Committee for the primary purpose of long-range planning. We'd all seen, and we'll talk about it tonight, incurred additional cost, and we've endured inflation and some other things that the city had not had revenues to match. Now, we're not obviously in dire straits and broke and have a $2 million deficit like another city or something like that, but what we want to do is ensure we maintain that reserve. So the committee was found to do that. The committee was found to come up with ideas and discuss those in front of council and the public to find ways that we can work and fix this together. So tonight, you're going to hear two things on the agenda. You're going to hear the levy lift introduction, and you're going to hear the biennial budget. I'm not going to go into the details because you're going to get a full presentation, so I'd rather leave it there and then provide my opinions in the due time and due process. The key here is that what we need to do is ensure that we give our city manager and his team direction, and then they take it from there and not micromanage it. So I want to make sure that's clear. And that's what I have on the Finance Committee. Do you want me to do transportation and move right through?
Yeah, just go through.
So then tonight I was elected the chair of the Transportation Committee. It's advantageous for our city because I also am on the skateboard, and I just got appointed to the PSRC Transportation Policy Board.
Could you say what the skateboard is?
Skateboard, South King County, I can't remember, you threw me off there, South County Area Transportation Board is what it is. All right, anyway, it's called skateboard, but in the transportation meeting, we had a robust conversation, particularly about the CIP. The good news, a couple of things we talked about, the fishing pier. It sounds like it's going to go up for bid, and construction could start as early as June. Arterial paving, which is also on our agenda tonight. There's several key parts of our town. The members of our Public Works Department were very excited that they were getting things paved. Here we are in a tough time, and we're getting stuff done like this. I want to remind people that it was years that a lot of our infrastructure were neglected, so it's over the last few years we've been getting some stuff done. We also talked about the 216th Bridge being completed sometime this summer, and it's really exciting. There's also going to be on the 28th WashDOT SR 509 interagency agreement. So good things are happening in the infrastructure. And the other thing we talked about, of course, was this Washington, where the old 509, for those that you don't know, was going to come right through our town. And now it's going to be rerouted around. And they talked about the state having to come in and do some improvements to the property, and gives us the ability to enhance the Barnes Creek Trail for our residents to enjoy. So there's some exciting news, and we hope to see something on that as well in the near future. And that's what I have. Oh, and I already told them about PSRC.
Yeah, yes.
Yep.
Was there a comment in the committee about the workload that they have this year?
Absolutely, and I apologize for that. One of the biggest things is in the Public Works Department in particular, we're short-staffed. We've lost a couple key leaders over the last couple years, and I have to say that our Public Works team has rallied and is doing an excellent job, and they deserve a lot of credit and applause from the city. I'll tell you, they're really pulling it, and there's a lot of projects that have kind of steamrolled to this point in time. We're going to be a busy city this year, and they're going to be working their tails off. So they deserve a lot of thanks. So if you see them, there's a couple of them back there, shake their hand. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Next, we'll go to the Environment Committee. Chair Harris.
Thank you. We had a presentation on the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. I think I maybe got that right, but nobody calls it that. They call it NPDES because, yeah. And basically, the city, the state makes the city responsible for everything that goes into Puget Sound. You know, it's like how if you have a business or a home, you're responsible for what goes into your drain. We're responsible for every drain. So it's a lot of work. We have to inventory all of our outfalls and our drains and stuff. It's a 6-year permit process, and we're at the last year of that. And we also talked about our stormwater management plan, and that's another biggie. And as Councilmember Mahoney said, there's a lot of stuff that is required of us by the state in order to keep you healthy and safe, and it all seems to come together in the same darn year. So it's just tons and tons of work, and thank you to staff. Let's see. Oh yeah, we really would like to have volunteers for Stormfest, which I believe is coming up in June, and we have adopt a drain system opportunities for volunteers that you can find on the city website and in the city currents. And I would like to have King County come in and do a presentation to show everyone how wonderful engineers are getting at identifying where different pollutants are coming from, literally down to the street level. And I would love to get more residents engaged. I think they would find that fascinating. And I think that's all I got.
Thank you, Councilmember. So I chair the Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee, and we met last week. And about PD, the department had a productive leadership retreat. And in regard to the license reading cameras, not the speed cameras, but they're called the flock camera system. Almost all of them are now active, and they're waiting. Those that have not been deployed yet are still waiting for some state permission. So, and in regard to those cameras, to create kind of a integration or a collaboration together especially along the Pacific Highway Corridor. Our sister city, half of our sister cities also have the same system, so we can be integrated in our response. And the other half of our cities are in talks of integrating the same system. So it's just not going to be a comfortable place for a criminal to drive down Pack Highway if you're going through Federal Way, Kent, Des Moines, SeaTac, and Tukwila. So that's coming soon. Our Redondo safety cameras are about ready to begin their trial period at the beginning of April. Very excited about that. I think the residents down there are excited about that. And then there was a discussion of a fireworks enforcement citation tool that's coming down the pike, and it'll be coming in front of council in a couple weeks, March 28th. And that's all I have for that meeting. All right, next we have the city manager's report, and I'm going to hand the baton to City Manager George.
Thanks, Mayor. So tonight we're going to start off with another presentation on an organization that is supported by the city and our human services funding. As I stated last council meeting, the city council allocates 1% of our total general fund to support community organizations. And those organizations are vetted by our Human Services Committee that then makes a recommendation to the City Council. So it's my pleasure to introduce Nicole Lowe. She is the Senior Director, Youth, Family, and Community at the YMCA. And before she starts here, I'll just note that this organization, this program is the second highest funded group from Human Services funding, and it's $30,000 per year. The only organization that we fund higher is the food bank. So this is a great program. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council members, and city staff. My name is Nicole Lau. I'm with the YMCA of Greater Seattle, as I was just introduced, and I wanted to share a little bit about the funding that y'all provided to us to provide our amazing kindergarten readiness programs. That first slide was a picture of one of our programs at our Midway Elementary, which is not very far from here at all. And that was a group of kiddos that we first started off with to be able to provide this program. So at the Midway Elementary program, we were able to partner with the school to be able to provide some caregiver supports and kiddo supports to engage and learn those kinder-ready skills. So these were kids who were 3.5 to 5 years old who had not been in kindergarten yet. They were preparing to go into kindergarten and were preparing to enter into Midway Elementary as their school as well. Some of the things that we noticed when we were able to provide these services was the kiddos who were able to start at kindergarten in Midway were able to get to know the school more. They were able to get to know the teachers. They got to be introduced to Principal Debbie, who was there at the time and was the principal, and the parents that had been able to make those caregiver connections as well got to know school staff, the principal, and the school itself. So it was as they described it, a warm handoff almost into the school system, which has been something that they hadn't traditionally had. Of the 30 plus kids that we supported over the school year, we were able to provide those kiddos with the kinder readiness, but also just basic language skills as well. Only one of them came to our program with English as their primary language. The rest of them spoke multiple languages, and we embraced that diversity and also helped them to grow their English language skills through our program as well. The other items that we focused on for our midway program was also literacy, social emotional learning, and then math skills. Those are the 3 skills that tend to be most lacking for kiddos when they go into the public school system. And so we worked with the school to identify those and worked to build those skills. We then also offered kind of like a jump start program like the school had done alongside of them for the summer months. And so we did a more intensive program for those kiddos over the summer to really engage kids that we may have missed or those that may have attended our program but needed a little bit of extra support to get them kinder ready by the time kindergarten started. And then the second offering that we have been providing is the Waterview of Affordable Housing Community. That's not too far from Midway either. But we offered a slightly different program there, again with caregivers and kiddos, but it's on the actual housing property, and so that allowed us to be able to offer that program. We were able to serve the same kiddos that would be going to Midway as well, but we were just doing it at their particular residence, so if anyone had a barrier to getting to us, that's how we were making sure that they didn't have that barrier. This is just some pictures of our program. These are all at the elementary program, but you can see the kiddos having fun learning through various activities and such. And then the second part that we had for being able to reach and ensure that families were connected with kindergarten readiness skills was through events. And so we did this in 3 different areas. So we partnered with our local Matt Griffin branch, which is down the road from here. We did some partnering with the school district more to provide registration events. And what this really helped to do was increase that registration specifically for Midway Elementary, because that's who we were supporting at the time. And per the principal at the time, they had the highest enrollment this year of kindergarten enrollment that they've ever had in the past 20 years, which was pretty amazing to us. We did not expect that. The other nice thing was that they got to meet school staff, and then they also got to have their immunizations looked at with the nurse and everything. So that was a big help from what the families had said. We also, at the Waterview Affordable Housing Community, we did some workshops to just offer some additional information to families about kindergarten readiness without the kiddos. So we would provide activities for the kids, but allow the caregivers to provide or to share community without their kiddos or whomever they're caring for in that space, so they can just work together with their other community members. We also made sure that we surveyed them and asked them what other workshops they wanted, and so they provided us with that information. So some of them are, living or a healthy living on a budget with kiddos, being able to meet the principal at the particular school, so in this case Midway, and then also how to do story time was a really big one for us to be able to provide. So that was a natural segue for us to go ahead and partner with the Des Moines Library, which is right over here. So we did 8 workshops. It was a series of workshops that we got to do with librarian Valerie over there. And she is an amazing story time teller, so if y'all haven't gone to hers or have kiddos, I would definitely suggest it. And she was able to pair and help families learn how to really leverage story time and improve that kindergarten readiness skills, because there's so many things they can learn during that time. And then we also got to provide some information about the WA Kids domain and some different things for parents to be able to learn and see on the OSPI website, which they weren't necessarily familiar with, and so we would walk them through that and break it down for them. And then these are just some pictures of our events. That first one is at our Matt Griffin branch, and then the other 2 are at the Waterview properties that we were able to provide. And so we partnered with a bunch of different folks, and on the far right to our, the Seattle Universal Math Museum came out and Xenomath came out to provide programming and partnership. And then the far left, we provided some activities during our Healthy Kids Day. And that is all that we have for our kindergarten readiness program. So thank you again so much for the dollars that y'all were able to provide. We did, we had put in the grant that we were going to serve 60 people over the course of the year, and we've already served, well, in 2023, we served over 206. So we were very fortunate to get that funding and very fortunate that we had built partnerships already to connect with the community and give them the space and the events and the programming to do this. So thank you so, so much.
Fantastic. Any questions? Councilmember Mahoney.
So when you say Waterview, you're talking about Waterview Crossing up on Pack.
Correct, yes.
Right? And they offer a space for you to do this, or do you do it in your facility?
Yeah, no, they offer a space. We partner with H&N, which are the property managers. It's free, and they don't charge us any rent or anything like that. So there's a gym space that's really large that we're able to do activities like that. So that's their gym. And then there's also like a smaller community space, and so we can do the parent workshops in there, or caregiver workshops.
And are you geographically restricted? Like I know you're doing Pack Highway or Pack Ridge, and I think that falls into the Matt Griffin area or whatever. So that's the extent of Des Moines that you can service, because you're doing good work, and I just was seeing if you could expand it, but I think you're kind of tied to that. Is that correct?
No, we could do any area of Des Moines. I think we had already had a partnership with Midway, and so we were building on that partnership. We had been building some community with the families, and so we had surveyed them already, and so that was kind of that avenue. We are working on expanding to Salish Place Apartments, which is also in Des Moines. So I just met with them, and then we're building some events to get some feedback from the families to really provide a programming that's meaningful to them.
Yeah, I think there's a new one that went in Point by Vintage too. That's
Oh, okay.
a little bit south of that. But anyway, no, thank you for the good work, and yeah, I'm all for you expanding into our town and helping our children, especially those that can use it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Fantastic work. I was helped serve on that committee that did the awards, and I'm thrilled to see a report like this that we're able to help all these kids, and that you guys have a very responsible, professional, but engaging program. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, council, on the consent agenda tonight, item 3, we have our Vet Seniors and Human Services Levy contract amendment, which is providing additional funding to our senior center for this year. And so tonight, I'm going to invite Novi Ochoa. She is our Senior Services Manager. She's going to present on how we're going to use those funds.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, staff, community. My name is Novi Ochoa. I am your Senior Services Manager for the Des Moines Senior Activity Center. And tonight I'm presenting the Grant Extension Award and some of the great work that we've done with funding. Just a bit of background, the Des Moines Activity Center was awarded a 5-year funding for the year 2019 through 2023 alongside the Central Area Senior Center. Central Area Senior Center is located in Seattle in the Leshigh neighborhood. They have a very loyal membership following that extends decades long and rich in history. And so that then created a cultural hub with them as a partner, the African Diaspora Hub. And so that allowed for us for diverse programming, making things culturally appropriate, allows us to connect our centers, engage in community isolated seniors, and then provide services and or support for the African diaspora community that's in and around our cities. We're able to provide extensive meal programming, such as a Friday lunch program that was really successful. In addition to that, we offered support staff, cultural coordinator, a part-time social worker, and a part-time van driver, We were also able to purchase a new 14-passenger ADA accessible van with, complete with a wheelchair lift. So that was a great addition to the senior center. Just a couple of pictures, small snapshots of what we are able to provide to the community. We're able to continuously provide grocery food bags for, and meet the need of our community. And additional to that, or you'll see on the right-hand picture of just a cultural event that we're able to provide for our community members. And so we have been graciously awarded additional funding for this year in the tune of $113,817. Provides ongoing support with King County and our partners for that grant utilization, offers training resources, and open houses countywide. And so in total, for that 5-year funding, in addition to this contract extension reward, brings us to $626,212. And so some of the proposed items that we're going to be using this extension funding towards, we've kickstarted a Ramadan meal pilot program. We're going to continue hosting our Beach Park Community Picnic, which really brings engagement in our community. We invite other centers and their members as well, so it really creates great partnerships and relationships with our members. We'll continue Zumba, fitness classes, cultural programming, those holiday food bags, to some of our low-income members at no charge to them. And of course, we'll continue our shared services and staffing with the cultural coordinator, a social worker, and the van driver. And this holiday season, we'll continue Kwanzaa celebrations. So again, just a small snippet of what we have to offer, what we'll be providing this extension year. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Novi. Any questions? Councilmember Mahoney.
Zumba, what days
Zumba.
do you have and what time?
Zumbas are running Wednesdays and Thursday mornings. Right now, we are shifting things over off-site because our building is under repair. And so we've been able to move a lot of our activities off-site, utilizing some of the open spaces within the city. A lot of our day trips are still happening because they are outside of the building, so we're managing to continue some of that effort and work.
So when they start, is it like 9 or 8 or?
Depends. So Wednesdays is 9:30 to about 10:45.
Okay.
And Thursdays is about the same time, 10:30, actually a little bit later, 10:30 to about 11:30. And that location, we're still trying to find a place for.
Okay.
Yeah, for that class.
Thank you.
Am I going to see you at the Zumba class?
If you find a place, and yeah, I'll schedule.
Okay, I think we can make that happen. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to get shamed by a bunch of people that might be a little older than me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, and then Councilmember Harris after that.
Yeah, I noticed you talked a lot about the Africa Diaspora funding that you get from the Central District, but the picture of one of the cultural events looked like a mariachi band.
It was. We used that funding for to celebrate Day of the Dead, this last year's celebration. A lot of it also goes towards cultural educational seminars. We host, we're going to actually relaunch a African drumming class, which has been very popular. I haven't noticed any other centers, fairly nearby that offer it. So I think it's a really special, at no cost to our community members class.
No, I think it's great. I just want to make sure everybody.
Yeah, I understand.
It's available to everybody.
Correct.
When you hear certain terminology, that doesn't mean it's a myopic focus on that.
Right.
But rather, it's an opportunity for everybody to meet everybody else and
That
to
is
experience
right.
different cultures, and it's a good way. So I think it's great work.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. So just because how did you happen to hook up with the Central Area Senior Center? This, I mean, is there like a, thumbnail story, or if not, that's fine, but I'm just curious because that's, over there.
It is, and they're located in the Lashai neighborhood, which is, right off of the lake there, and
Yeah.
I
Very
don't know the origin or how we got to partnering up with them.
Okay, well, then
so I
I'll
don't
just
have a-
stop there and,
I can
yeah.
find out for you.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious, and definitely, when you get the drum circle going, I mean, definitely, more djembes, yeah.
So I just wanted to note regarding the status of the senior center, it is currently closed because we had that pipe burst from the cold weather. So we're in the process of getting it reopened. I will note that today we just received approval that we had submitted for emergency funding because there was a certain amount of damage that was done throughout the county. And so that was submitted to the state, and they have approved us for basically a declaration of emergency for funding to pay us back for the city's deductible that we paid for the damage, as well as the staff time that we've spent on this. So hopefully, and additionally lost revenue for rentals. So hopefully, as we work our way through this, and Shannon Kirchberg, our emergency management director, is shepherding that through. At the end of this, hopefully it'll be a revenue neutral event, even though it took this facility offline for a while. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, I do, for one. Well, I think Councilmember Harris's question, I think part of the funding, a segment of that funding, was based on building a partnership and a multicultural partnership. So I'm not exactly sure why that specific one was picked, other than they receive a portion of funding as well for having the partnership. Both senior centers receive funding based on interaction and fulfilling that relationship. But, oh my goodness, I've been to some of these events, and I went to the one where they danced. They had the entire senior center down there come down and do this dance performance, and it was loud and celebratory. It was fabulous. And then the van also enables the travel back and forth, right? People can go down there, and then they can come here, which is a fantastic ad for increasing the relationship, right, back and forth. And then for any of you who want to participate in these events, check your City Currents magazine, because the events that are planned well in advance are in the Currents. And also you can follow the Activity Center on Facebook, right? Is it
The Des Moines Activity Center.
Des Moines Activity Center on Facebook, and then they have long-term, far-term, near-term events all on their Facebook page. Novi, you're awesome. Thank you
Pretty
so
active,
much.
so thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Novi. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, moving to consent. Would the city clerk please read the consent agenda?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, approval of minutes. Item 3, Vets, Seniors, and Human Services Levy Contract Extension Amendment. Item 4, King County Parks Capital and Open Space Grant Award, Midway Open Space Project. Item 5, 2024 Overlay Program, Public Works Construction Contract Award and Consultant Services Agreement for Construction Administration and Inspection, and that concludes the consent agenda, Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Nutting?
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Do I have a second? Deputy Mayor Steinmetz. Is there a council member that wishes to pull an item? Councilmember Harris.
I would like to pull item 5, please.
All right, pulling item 5. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So take it to a vote. All in favor of the items as read? And it's a 7-0, unanimous. Councilmember Harris, go ahead and take item 5.
Thank you. This is really just a question that I've been curious about for a while regarding number 2. Does the city have any kind of formal review process for long-standing consultants. This is nothing against parametrics or any, but it just occurred to me that we have very long-standing relationships with any number of people, and it has been my experience to just occasionally just sort of do a little run-through about performance, be it 5 years, 7 years, what have you, and I've never seen something like that.
Yeah, good evening. Tom Yoen, Acting Public Works Director. So yes, our on-call consultants, we do kind of on a bi-yearly basis. So every 2 years, we advertise a request for proposals from on-call consultants. They submit those, we review those internally through our staff, and then we pick, typically it's, I believe our on-call currently is 8 or 9 consultants, and then we bring that, I can't remember if we bring that, I don't believe we bring that to council.
No, we do. Yeah, those are approved by the city council, the
Yeah.
contract amounts.
Okay.
I think we award the contracts up to $1 million. And then, like in this instance, we can award a lesser amount.
Well, no, okay, that's fine, thank you.
So, Councilmember Harris, since you pulled it, would you like to make the motion? I've got them right here if you want.
I could, if I could read it, but sure, why not?
Right.
Motion 1 is to approve the Public Works contract with Icon Materials for 2024 overlay program in the amount of $1,211,177.15. Authorize a project construction contingency in the amount of $120,000, and further authorize the acting city manager to sign said contract substantially in the form as submitted.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Nutting has a second. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0, it's unanimous. Thank you. Would you like to take the second motion? You did so well with the first one.
I'd be thrilled. Motion number 2 is to approve the 24-25 on-call civil engineering services task administration 2024-01 with Parametrics, Inc. to provide construction administration and inspection services for the 2024 overlay program in the amount of $150,000, and further authorize the acting city manager to sign said task assignment substantially in the form as submitted.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Nutting has a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0, unanimous, and it passes. Thank you. All right, that ends our consent agenda. And we're moving into a public hearing. So the purpose of this agenda item is for the city council to hold a public hearing to consider a draft ordinance to reclassify tax parcel. So I will now open the public hearing. We will begin with a staff presentation by Community Development Director Denise Lathrop.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight's public hearing is for Council to consider the site-specific zoning map amendment for the Saddlebrook Apartments. We received an application for this site-specific rezone from the property owner, and the goal is to bring the existing development pattern into consistency with, and the underlying zoning into consistency with the comprehensive plan. The development, which is outlined in blue on the right, was permitted in King County prior to being annexed to the city in 1997. And it is considered a legal non-conforming use because the development pattern is inconsistent with that underlying zoning of single-family residential. So on the map here, on the left is the current zoning, which is the yellow is single-family residential. And then on the right is what the current comprehensive plan designation is, which is the lighter brown that says MF. for multifamily. And as I mentioned before, the proposed map amendment would rezone this property to the RM 1800 zone. And that zone best represents the density of this particular property. It's an apartment complex that has 223 units of housing. And this zoning also provides a nice buffer between the single-family residential zoning to the west and the more intense commercial zoning to the east. So these are the criteria for a site-specific rezone, and the proposed project meets all of the requirements here. This was also provided in your council packet. So that includes, it meets concurrency requirements under the GMA. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. It bears a substantial relation to public health, safety, and welfare. It is warranted in order to achieve consistency with the comprehensive plan. The property in question is adjacent and contiguous to property of the same or higher zoning classification. So that higher zoning classification is that Woodmont commercial zone that you saw to the east. And it would not result in anything that would be detrimental because it's an existing development on the site and there's no proposed expansion to that development. And the amendment has merit and value for the community as a whole. So this is just a quick overview of the process. We received an application in late August from the law firm for the project owner, or the property owner, Saddlebrook Apartments. The site-specific rezone is a quasi-judicial decision by the City Council and requires a comment period and a public hearing. There was only one email question we received, and it was a property owner asking if they were included in the rezone, and it was an adjacent parcel, so it wasn't relevant to them. So this, when a site-specific rezone is consistent with the comprehensive plan and it doesn't require an amendment to the comprehensive plan, it's exempt from requirements for SEPA threshold determination, and it's also exempt from the Department of Commerce 60-day comment period. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to embark on a lot of reading. Don't let your eyes glaze over. The proposed action is a Type 4 land use decision of the City Council sitting in a quasi-judicial role, to which the appearance of fairness doctrine applies. Under that rule, during the pendency of any quasi-judicial proceeding, no member of a decision-making body may engage in ex parte communications with opponents or proponents with respect to the proposal which is the subject of the proceeding, unless that person places on the record the substance of any written or oral ex parte communications concerning the decision of the action, and provides that public announcement of the content of the communication and of the parties' rights to rebut the substance of the communication shall be made at each hearing where the action is considered or taken on the subject to which the communication is related. All council members should now give consideration as to whether they have demonstrated bias or prejudice for or against any party to the proceedings, a direct or indirect monetary interest in the outcome of the proceedings, a prejudgment of the issue prior to hearing the facts on record, or ex parte contact with any individual, including administrative staff, with regard to an issue prior to the hearing. If any council member should answer in the affirmative, then that council member should state the reason for their answer at this time so that the chair may inquire of the administration as to whether a violation of the appearance of fairness doctrine exists. Have any of you, speaking to the council, have any of you had any discussion on this topic, or do you feel you have an actual or the appearance of conflict of interest? It is now time for public comment portion of the hearing, of the public hearing. All comments by proponents, opponents, or the public shall be made from the podium, and any individual making comments shall first give their name and the city in which they reside. Individuals will have 3 minutes to speak. It's not necessary to be a proponent or opponent in order to speak. If you consider yourself neither a proponent or opponent, please speak during the proponent portion and identify yourself as neither a proponent or an opponent. No comments shall be made from any other location, and anyone making out-of-order comments shall be subject to removal from the meeting. There will be no demonstrations during or at the conclusion of anyone's presentation. So I do have one person signed up to speak, and so I'm going to ask you, it is Evan Heaney. So Evan, first just go ahead and stand, well, go ahead. Stand and raise your right hand and to consider the following questions and respond with "I do." Okay. Do you affirm under penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of Washington that the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
All right. So now that you're already at the podium, I'm going to go ahead and ask you, you're free to speak right now. Go ahead. Begin.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Good evening. My name is Evan Heaney. I reside in Renton. I'm just here to make a brief statement in support of this rezone request. That was a thorough presentation. Thank you, Ms. Lathrop, for presenting that. I'm not going to belabor the point. The one thing I'll emphasize is that this is a non-project rezone request. We're not contemplating developing this parcel into anything but the existing apartment complex. The goal is just to bring it, it's currently a non-conforming use. It has been since the property was annexed in the 90s. And when we purchased the property in late 2022, to be candid, it was a lender requirement that we needed to bring this property into a conforming use. And practically it makes sense too, as a property owner. Having a conforming use gives us a lot more flexibility. Should something happen to the property, it increases the value and marketability of the property and those around it too, as ours goes up. So as we contemplated how to address this issue, we realized that the city's comprehensive plan actually lists the preferred zoning as multifamily instead of the residential single family that it currently exists as. So we thought the best route was to do a site-specific, non-project rezone request to benefit us in that we can become a conforming use, but also to benefit the city so that the zoning map comes more in line with the comprehensive plan. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have, but otherwise I won't take any more of your time.
I think the question portion is just in another moment or so. Thank you for being available.
Thank you.
So to continue with the public comment portion, is there anyone else who didn't sign up, didn't realize and that you needed to and wishes to speak? Okay, second time. Is there anyone who didn't sign up to speak that wishes to speak? And third time. Is there anyone else who didn't sign up to speak but wishes to speak? All right. Pardon? I don't think we can during a public hearing. Yeah, it's not, we can't take questions during the middle of a hearing. Thank you, though. Let's see. I will now inquire of the administration as to whether there have been any misstatements of fact or whether the administration wishes to introduce any material as to subjects raised by the proponent or opponents or alter in any regard its initial recommendations.
There's nothing further, Mayor.
Thank you. So now it's time for council questions. Please, questions only at this point. Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember Nutting.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. So this meets the, you stated it meets the GMP and the comprehensive plan for this rezone, the growth management, I'm sorry, GMA, the Growth Management Act?
Yes, and that specific criteria related to concurrency requirements, and this is an existing development, and it already has services and utilities provided.
Is there a possibility for a new development on the property?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that because we would have to do an analysis to see if there's any capacity for any additional development on that site. But right now, because of adjacent critical areas and that, their plan was to just allow the existing development to continue as is.
Okay, and that answered my third question too, so thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Denise. I notice on the slide that shows the comprehensive plan land use, there's a purple section down here at the bottom. No, it's, yeah, the comparison to PF. What does PF stand for? And it appears to be missing from the next slide.
That's for public facility, but that doesn't relate to this particular property.
Mm-hmm.
It's a land use classification, and
Is that where the substation is?
you know, I don't know, but I will definitely follow up with you maybe afterwards in case there's, I know we had these maps created for us, and so we'll just double check that that didn't get dropped off in preparing the figure for the ordinance.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't, I mean, it certainly.
Oh, I know the reason. I'm sorry. It's because the map on the right-hand side is the comprehensive land use plan, and the map on the left, and the next page is the zoning map. And so many of our public facilities have underlying zoning that is different than what's the comprehensive plan. So, for example, some of our parks might say public facility or park, but then the underlying zoning might be residential suburban estates or another type of use. Sorry, it took me a minute to sort of like reel in on that one.
It caught my eye, so I wanted to just ask, because I don't know what PF is.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
And just to clarify that, it's a public facility, like Denise said, but it's a stormwater detention pond.
Okay.
Hey, any other questions from the council? All right. I will now close the public hearing. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Nutting.
I move to enact draft ordinance number 24-018, amending DMMC 18.10.050, adoption of official zoning map to reclassify tax parcel 2822049007 from RS 7200 single family resident zone to RM-1800 residential multifamily zone for the Saddlebrook apartment property.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Mahoney has a second. Okay, discussion. Councilmember Nutting and then Councilmember Mahoney.
To me, it absolutely makes sense if that's a requirement, and it's not been done since we acquired the property. It makes sense to me.
Thank
I
you.
was going to use 2 words, no brainer.
Okay.
Wow, that's it?
Yeah.
That's a record. Okay. Any other comments or questions, or any more discussion? Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I kind of agree that this is, it may be a legal non-conforming use, but why shouldn't it be a conforming use? And if we can do that in the context of our comprehensive plan, I think that's, everything just kind of came together. So I think this makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. All right, without further ado, let's take it to the vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0 vote unanimous. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for coming, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here tonight. Okay, that takes us to a new segment of the meeting. We are going to begin with the city manager recruitment presentation by our assistant manager, A.J. Johnson.
Good evening, council. Good evening, community members, staff. My name is AJ Johnson-Newton, and I am the Assistant City Manager for the City of Des Moines. So tonight, I am presenting on the request for proposal for the executive search firm for the 2024 City Manager recruitment. And as you can tell by that graphic, tonight is the time for action. Next, please. So the first few slides will look familiar for those who have been following along, but I just wanted to provide a brief recap for those that might just be tuning in tonight. So we released our RFP, request for proposal, for an executive search firm to conduct our city manager recruitment on January 19th. We requested that those proposals be back to us by February 20th. I released them to council on February 27th. And now we are at the time where potentially the council could be making a decision tonight on which executive search firm they would like to use. Next slide, please. So we received 6 proposals from our vendors, and there they are listed. So Strategic Government Resources, which you will see will be referred to SGR from here on out. Prothman, GMP, Marion Gov, MGET of America, also known as GovHR, and Raft Ellis. Next slide, please. Okay, so as part of the council's evaluation process, they used evaluation criteria that we developed in the city's RFP. The city developed an evaluation rating sheet tool for the council to use that included 7 main criterias and some subcategories. We used numerical scoring for that evaluation rating sheet tool from 1 to 5. And at the end, it produced a weighted final score. Next slide, please. So here is the weighted scoring. I just want to point out a couple things. This is without scores, but just I wanted to give you, the public, a chance to see what the council was using as their tool. So a couple things about this. The evaluation tool was really designed to provide a method for the council, which essentially is 7 different people with 7 different ways of processing and evaluating information. And basically it was designed to get them on the same page to compare all the vendors on a like-to-like basis. And so it wasn't designed to replace the need for discussion or to be the basis for the decision that they're going to make tonight. It was just simply designed to be a tool for them to help evaluate the RFPs and then use that as part of their decision-making process. Additionally, one of the reasons why I elected to use weighted scoring was because not all scores are equal. So in this case, if you look at evaluation criteria number 1, adherence to RFP instructions. I didn't want to end up in a situation where the council was evaluating and basically adherence to the RFP instruction was, did you follow the instructions that we gave you when you submitted your proposal? For that to have the same weight as the references or the cost or the process that they were going to use. So that's why I elected to use a weighted scoring model for the evaluation tool. I do also want to mention that as we go through the presentation at the end, I did remove the weights, just to see, and the results were the same. So I will show that to you in the later slides. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm throwing myself on the mercy of the council here. So full disclosure, one of the things that is our practice in the HR department is when we create spreadsheets is when we get them back, we go through and review the formulas on the spreadsheet just to make sure normally that the users didn't adjust any formulas and make sure that there aren't any errors. Well, unfortunately in this case, I found our errors, my errors. And so I did have to adjust 2 formulas on the spreadsheet. I want to say that they did not affect the scoring or the rating for the council. Essentially, I had numbers related to a non-category. So, and there was another place where I had to just make sure that the sum total was carried through. So again, it didn't affect any of the scores that the council put in. It just reflected the final bottom line total. So I adjusted that, didn't change anything. And as my kids say, I ensured the math was mathing. Now, I would not suggest you go home and use that with your kids because I don't think that's the right way to use it, but it felt appropriate. Next slide, please. Okay. So here is SGR. And I'll go through these quickly, but essentially what I did was I took each council member's score, and you can see that across the top. I totaled it at the bottom, and it came up to 24.24. This is the weighted scoring. Next slide, please. Prothman, 19.31. Next slide, please. GMP, 23.04. Next slide, please. Marion Gov, 16.41. Next slide, please. MJT of America, 22.16. Next slide, please. And Raft Ellis, 20.12. Next slide, please. So I put together the rankings based on the final weighted score, and this is the order. SGR had the highest score. I'd also like to point out that this was the same company that conducted the previous city manager recruitment, so we have had some experience using them. Next slide, please. This is without the weighted final score, and as you can see, it didn't change the ranking order. Next slide, please. So before I turn this over to the council, I just want to repeat what I said earlier. The evaluation sheet was just designed to ensure consistency in evaluation. It's a tool of decision-making. It's not designed to replace the decision. Ratings can be skewed depending on the rater. We tried to design the spreadsheet to not create outliers, but those things can happen. There's other reasons why you may not want to rely on the scoring as your final decision-making. Maybe your individual preferred vendor was not the one that was reflected after we compiled all the results. Another reason where you may want to go with something different is maybe the presentation was great and you scored, everywhere according to that, but you received a reference back and the reference was a little bit questionable. So even though everything else was great about that particular vendor, you may decide, you know what, I really want to give more credence to the reference that I received because they've actually used the company. So I wanted to just point that out. It's just a tool for the council to use tonight as they begin their discussion. Next slide, please. Turn it over to council.
Thank you. So are there any questions before we begin discussion? Just questions right now, if we could. Any questions? Councilmember Grace Matsui.
I know last week we hadn't received 100% of the references that you had asked for, and I'm wondering if any additional ones came in, just out of curiosity. Not to say that I will wait, but.
No, I didn't receive anything else.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. So before we begin discussion, I would like to propose a format. I'd like to open this up in a portion of the discussion to a little bit more of a study session format, if we need to, a little bit more open discussion if we need to go there. And what I would also like to do is reduce our options to the top 2 or 3 with the nods from the council, if that is, that's all right with the council, in order to reduce the discussion time and not really open the floor for options that don't seem to be favorites. So would everybody be in favor of only discussing the top 3? Let's say if you're opposed to that, please raise your hand. Okay, let's go. Okay, the top 3, right there. SGR, GMP, and GovHR, MGT. Okay, might push it one more further. Would anybody be opposed to only discussing the top 2? Okay, then that's what I would like to do, is open the floor to only discussing your opinions of those possible.
Point of order,
Yes, sir.
could I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
So, not being the presiding officer, is there any council member, I would ask you to forward this, is there any council member that had strong feelings in favor any of the choices beside the top 2 or 3? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
I can ask that question, except for nobody had an opposition to moving forward in what I just asked. Nobody was in opposition. So just to move the conversation forward. So we'll just go in order. And if you have a definite favorite of those top two, go ahead and give us your pitch. And after everybody has gone one or two times, if you want to go twice, then I will open the floor for a motion and then discussion. But I'm trying to not have to make amended motions is what we're trying to get at here. Okay, I'm opening the floor. Councilmember Mahoney.
I read all of the proposals. SGR won that for me. I read the references. SGR won that for me. Then I looked at it differently doing the rankings, which I thought was a unique way of doing it. I appreciate it. SGR won that. As far as price, they were in the middle, but all the other components that I think are important to selecting a city manager, and sometimes when you go discount, you get less. So that's where I felt SGR won in all accounts for me. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I had a very different take. Although SGR, certainly was the sort of the biggest, slickest, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. They have a very good program. I thought it was awfully focused on Texas, where they're based. And they, I did not get the sense that they were that well connected in Washington State. When we used them last time, we got a top candidate from Utah who, upon being offered the job, decided to go teach in China instead. We had another woman from just outside Cleveland who was suing her municipality, and Michael Matthias, who ended up getting the job. And, although people have different views of Michael, he did the job he was asked to do. But he was, as I remember it, the third choice out of that ranking. I felt that GMP was much more locally tied. I do think it's important to consider the ability to attract Washington State candidates because I think the field or the environment in Washington State is somewhat unique. And I've lived up and down the West Coast and in a couple other states as well. So I think that GMP has local connections. They got very good ratings. I thought their price was certainly competitive, right in about that sort of mid-range in the mid 20,000. But it was a nice straightforward presentation that they did. It wasn't as big and as slick as SGR's, I would agree, but I think they're probably a better fit for our community at this time to do this particular job search. And so I'd just point out that really SGR was not in my top three. It was 4, but it was a very close 4, between 4 and 3. But I think GMP really put together a good, solid proposal. They have a lot of connections around the state, and they would be my first choice.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have an offering? Councilmember Grace Matsui.
Thank you. In reviewing the vendor proposals, first I want to say thank you for the criteria, and I know that was quite a long evening for us to hash that out and decide on what those 7 buckets were that we were going to be rating folks on. And I appreciate the discussion that we were able to have as colleagues, and also your leadership in helping us facilitate that, because it was quite a chore to get us all to agree on those criteria. Which I think speaks to the importance of sticking with those criteria as well. I think that some of the things that stood out for me in my first choice was SGR, had a lot to do with some of the extra components that they had, including a better, what seemed to me, in my reading, some additional technology tools beyond like, we Google your candidates, they actually use a product, LexisNexis, which is used in our industry to look into backgrounds of candidates. And they also offered some coaching, and not only that, but the ability to do some personality and communication assessment using something like a DISC tool that you can use as an inventory to see how those potential candidates might work with your leadership team. And those are things that the small, not quite as technology advanced vendors seem to have. So for me, that kind of put an edge to them where they have a broader use of tools and more available to them that we could take advantage of. While I know that you can go with local or national companies, and there's quite a few of them, this is also a concern that can be addressed when instructing and meeting with the vendor in person, and when they come to an analysis of what the council believes that we need or what the public believes that we need. And if they want to be, if we want to direct them to source local candidates, that's something that we can address at that time. So they have my full support in this vote.
And again, that was SGR. Right. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments before I ask for a motion? Okay, okay, go ahead, Councilmember Harris.
I don't think I'm ratting anyone out to say that I felt that cost should be weighted at about zero. This is like a once in a generation, hopefully, Jesus, decision, and cost should be irrelevant, almost irrelevant to this decision. As far as the other stuff, I'm just going on the record here, I was struck by, frankly, a lot of the vendors were careless in their presentations. There were numerous typos in almost all of them. And I was biased against SGR, frankly, because I am struggling with selecting the firm that chose our last city manager, or helped us choose. And I just got to say, because I was not on the inside, I always wonder, how much of it came down to the council and how much of it was guidance from the recruiter, and I will never know, but but I decided that just looking at these, I would have used very different metrics from the scoring system, but in conclusion, I said that because I honestly can't tell who's going to do the best job, I've decided that it comes down to the council itself. You're going to get a certain number of applicants and so on, but we are 7 very different people, and either we're going to guide the process to a good city manager or we're not. And I'm not going to put that burden on any particular vendor. So whoever you guys want, I'm there, because I'm pretty sure that whoever is in this top 3, if we end up not getting somebody stellar, it will not be that vendor's responsibility. Thank you.
Right, any further comments? Do I have a motion? Councilmember Nutting.
I move to approve the selection of SGR as the executive search recruitment firm recruitment firm to conduct the recruitment for city manager vacancy and authorize the interim city manager to enter into an agreement for their services.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Mahoney has a second. Discussion. All right, looks like we're ready to take a vote. All in favor of SGR for our choice, raise your right hand. I have Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Grace Matsui, Councilmember Mahoney, and myself. All opposed? Councilmember Oxiger, opposed, abstain.
I'm just going to abstain.
Abstention? Councilmember Harris. Looks like we've chosen SGR as our new vendor. Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, would it be possible for us to know if we are still on our timeline, if we've met our objective for this proposal, and that we're still on track?
Question.
So, yes, so I will contact the vendor tomorrow and work with the legal department to start to get the services agreement ready. And I will make contact with them and find out when they will be prepared to meet with the council.
And we met our own deadline for getting.
We did, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Point of order, how about taking 5, given that we've got 2 big, I'm sorry, yeah, would that be cool?
Well, I think these are going to go pretty fast, and it's not, we haven't even been in
Oh,
session
okay,
for
okay.
an hour and a half.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is biennial budgeting. The purpose of this item is for the city council to consider the adoption of a biennial budget. And we have a staff presentation by Financial Director Jeff Friend.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Jeff Friend, Finance Director. Tonight, we're going to look at biennial budgeting as Finance Department is requesting an ordinance passing, adopting biennial budgeting, but we want to discuss, the budgeting in Washington State. We want to take a look at what exactly a budget process is, look at the disadvantages and advantages of biennial budgeting, and then explain the reason for our request. So budgeting in Washington State, municipal, sorry, I'm just so excited. Yes. So cities in Washington State can budget one of 2 ways. In 1985, the state legislature passed the Municipal Biennial Budget Act that basically says annual budgeting is basically a default. So that means that every year, municipalities would, pass a budget by the end of the year, and then the next year they would start again. Biennial budgeting is allowed by this act, which is you budget for 2 years at a time, and then again next 2 years. And we're going to look at what that process is. What it isn't is passing a budget for 2 years and walking away for 2 years and hoping everything goes well and then coming back 2 years later. And it's not a right or wrong issue either. It's a preference. And one of the questions that I was asked during this discussion is why now? Why haven't we asked for this prior? And the response to that is the prior city manager had a budget background and he had a preference for annual budgeting. Therefore, we did annual budgeting. And now, due to timing, it seemed like it was a good time to bring it up to council and let council weigh in on what their preference is. Second point, the cities can change to a biennial cycle through issuing an ordinance. The ordinance must be passed 6 months before the beginning of the biennium, and a biennium is required by law to start with an odd-numbered year. So, again, speaking of timing, our next budget is 2025, and so if we were to do a biennial budget, it would be the 2025-2026 budget, and we would, if we opted to do biennial budgeting, we would have till June 30th to make that decision. As the person who's involved in the budget process and leading it, it's always good to know ahead of time what you're going to do. So that's why we're looking at this in March and not waiting until June when we're getting the budget going. And the last point here is biennial budgeting is a common practice for cities in Washington State. There's a list in the packet of cities that are nearby that do biennial budgeting. And the point isn't that, well, we should do what they're doing, but it's just to say it's not this unusual, weird thing. It's, Bellevue, Burien, Fife, they do biennial budgeting. In Covington and Pacific, they do annual budgeting like we do. So the budget cycle. So this is, when we're talking about the budget process, I thought it was a good idea just to give an idea of what I mean. So the annual budget cycle, we begin in May, roughly, though I feel like I've already begun for the next budget. May through June, one of the things we do is review the financial and budget policies. We determine and discuss budget assumptions, like what do we think is going to happen, coming up here, what projects do you think is going to occur next year. And then we review economic data and trends. In June and July, we develop the baseline budget, which is department budget submissions and department meetings with the city manager. So really what that is a collaborative effort citywide of all the departments looking at their budget, looking at what they want to do next year, and submitting those numbers into finance. And then once that's done, and they've got their department budget together, then finance and that department and the city manager get together and they review those numbers and discuss what they want to do. There's not really cuts or anything done at that point, but it's more of a discussion. Cuts come later. So then we're into August, and August is when we do the initial forecast. There's also budget balancing decisions that can involve biweekly meetings with the city manager for several weeks. And that's usually when finance directors don't sleep. Everybody's turned in their numbers, and then we see where we're at, and then we have to make sure that to our best of our ability to get those numbers to work for the city. And then prepare presentation for council budget retreat. So August is a big month, so we've got our numbers together, we're balancing the budget, and we're about to get ready, or we are getting ready for the budget retreat for city council, which is in September. So September, we begin with the city council budget retreat, where we present basically what's going on with the budget and what the important economic factors are, where we see things, where's the city at that point in the process. We develop a draft of the budget message. So every budget has a message from the city manager, as it's his initial budget he's submitting to council. And usually those involve the economic climate, trends, forecasts, and really the reasons why we're presenting the numbers we are. Then we head into October and November. So about that time, we're getting ready for the public hearings, which there are 2 to pass the annual budget. And part of that is council members have the option to have individual meetings with the finance director to discuss the budget. And usually those are always wonderful. I always enjoy those. Sorry. I just wanted to be positive. No, that was not sarcastic. They're always good, and I do enjoy them. Then we present the preliminary annual budget, as I mentioned, in 2 public hearings, and also this presented to the Citizens Advisory Committee, which we did last year. One aspect that is not included in this cycle that we want to address this year is public engagement. And that's kind of what I'm researching on, is how to get the community's priorities involved in the budget cycle. So that's what it looks like for an annual budget cycle. Is the budget would be approved by 12/31, calendar changes, you're back at the beginning of the year, and you do it all over again. So the biennial budget cycle, so for year 1, an even numbered budget year. So if you think in your mind, we're doing a 25-26 budget this year. So we would be in year 1 because it's 2024. So it'd be very much the same, except we would do a bit more work because we would be including 2 years instead of 1 year. The second year would be year 2. So then say we adopt a 2025-2026 budget. Then the question would be, well, what are you going to do in 2025 if you're not restarting that process all over again? And then that would be where state law also comes in. So as I mentioned, you don't just pass it and walk away. So finance reviews the economic trends and updates financial forecasts, which we would actually have more time to do because we wouldn't be building a budget from scratch. And secondly, from September 1st through December 31st, the city reviews the budget. So there's a built-in, according to state law, review and modification period. So the state's just not going to let you walk away from your budget and not look at it. So it's required by Washington state law, and modifications are adopted through ordinance. So council would pass an ordinance, say we had a capital project that we didn't know about a year before, and we make a modification, and that would go to council to be adopted through ordinance. So advantages to biennial budgeting. The first point is encourages a long-term planning focus over multiple years instead of just balancing the budget for a single year. So that's one of the reasons that we actually are requesting the change to biennial budgeting, is it does let you, it has a, directors would be in the position where they're not looking at just one single year and then they're done, but they're planning-wise, they're looking out 2 years. So at least the focus shifts. Secondly, reducing the total amount of time spent budgeting over a 2-year period and freeing up time for other projects in year 2. In year 2, all city departments would benefit from time savings. So in the second year, we're still working on the budget. We have more time to do forecasts and look at trends, but also Public Works has more time to spend on their projects and not have to start a whole new budget process from scratch. The police, they can focus more on policing and public safety than budgeting for a whole budget cycle in that second year. And then the third, budgets could be less politicized, as the budgets would only be adopted in non-election years. So it's really the first two advantages is what we're kind of hanging our hat on with this request, is to extend long-term planning, because we feel that that's an area the city can improve. And then also, with the greater efficiency, we feel like that's a way that the taxpayer gets more for their money, and the city doesn't have to spend any money to get that to happen. Okay. Disadvantages to biennial budgeting. First point is more time and effort to develop the budget in year 1. So if we were to budget for 2 years, we're budgeting for an extra year. That's more thought. That's more planning for what's going to happen in 2 years instead of 1. So that is a bit more of a heavy lift than it normally would be. Second, a perceived loss of control by the legislative body, since they are approving the budget for 2 years at a time. I think in the packet for the Finance Committee, I addressed this as far as the control by legislative body. The council always has full control of the budget. And on top of that, we have a Finance Committee now, so that's even more involvement by council. Thirdly, more difficulty and uncertainty forecasting revenues and expenditures further into the future. So this one kind of contradicts one of the advantages that we just discussed as far as long-term planning. So as far as having a long-term focus, the advantage is you have directors and departments, and they're looking at more than just one calendar year and then starting over. The disadvantage is, as far as the finance side, if I was to try to forecast 2026 right now, that's pretty far out. But that's why we have the review period, and we would have more time in the second year. We would still forecast 2026, but we would do it in 2025. So we're still monitoring the budget and keeping on top of it, but that is a disadvantage at this point in time to try to forecast what's happening 2 years from now. And then lastly, some jurisdictions spending too much time on budget amendments or the mid-biennium review and adjustment, eliminating any time savings in year 2. And this one kind of makes me chuckle because I can't imagine being so excited about budget amendments and review that you're doing just as much work as you did before. Though we would put in the appropriate effort and time into the review to make sure that we have a good budget, but to match actually our time savings, I never heard of that. So that one does, I had to include it. I didn't want to just not do so. And then before we get to the motions, I did want to address one thing is there is a topic that came up in the public comment that the public comment earlier I agreed 100% wholeheartedly with, but then we did touch on financial reporting, and that did also come up in the Finance Committee. And I just want to address that piece as far as improving financial reporting. For example, there's a lot of external factors that affect timeliness. So our 2022 financial statements, they're not out yet because our audit's not done. So the state auditors came out in December, which is later than usual. And so if there is a timeliness issue, but it's timeliness issue with the state auditors. But we are working on financial reporting. I was financial reporting manager for King County Housing Authority for about 10 years. So it's a subject, as Councilmember Harris knows, close to my heart. But we're improving timeliness. Our accounting system is we're seeing those efficiencies, and we should be getting quarterly reports out sooner, as we have in the past. We're also working on improving the scope of what we're reporting on. So I appreciate those comments, and I don't want this to seem like a rebuttal as much as a helpful explanation of what's going on with that piece of the process. So now we are to motions, and are there, I would like to add, I'm sorry, there are two motions, one to adopt the ordinance and the second to move to a second reading, because we didn't want to it's a significant change in process, and so we wanted to give council time to consider.
Thank you. Before we entertain the motion, just want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask any clarifying questions. Councilmember Harris.
I have a clarifying question. Should we decide to go with motion 2, do you have adequate time and resources to make that shift, should we choose to go to biennial budgeting? I'm sorry, basically, can we put this off till the next meeting and you still make the change if we vote to do so?
Yes.
So we don't have to decide tonight?
No.
One way or the other. Schwell.
Councilmember Oxker.
Yes, I move to pass draft ordinance.
Oh, wait, this is just time for questions. I'm asking if you still, any other questions? Councilmember Hona.
I have a question. So we decide policy. You have to execute the policy. You've looked at this, you've had a chance to assess the budget. What is your preference of choices of going biennial or annual? You put it before us, but since you're gonna have to do the job, I wanna know that answer.
I would say it's been finance's preference for some time. So I think was my predecessor's preference, and it's also my preference.
To go biennial?
To go biennial, I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry to get you off the fence there, but I wanted to hear, because you're gonna have to do the job. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. Is this a question? Yes. Okay. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Jeff, do you feel we have an adequate financial plan in place? And do you feel that the forecasting ability that we have is up to kind of keeping on top of a biennial budget versus a one-year budget?
Yes, we would be forecasting the same amount of times. So we're gonna forecast this year. If it's biennial, then, I mean, we would still do that forecast. I don't think a forecast for 2026 would be, I mean, who knows, right? But then we would forecast for 2026 the following year. Because it really, the way I look at that second year is instead of starting from scratch, you're updating what you already have. And that, you have additional time to do that. So you're not scrambling like you are in year one or during an annual budget, but you have time to really dig into the forecast, do that analysis, look at the trends. And so I'm not concerned about really that piece of it, because it's very similar. It's just there's a different nature to the second year, if that makes sense.
Second question.
Yeah, and I also asked about a financial plan.
Right.
That you follow the values of the plan, then that predicts. Is there a sufficient plan in place in your mind?
Right. Well, I would say the budget is the financial plan. The financial plan, I mean, the budget is your plan, and the financial reporting is explaining what happened. So I would say yes.
Question. Did you have a question, Councilmember Harris?
I do.
Okay.
So this is more for the camera, but basically, does shifting to biennial budgeting affect our audit process and review process with the state of Washington in any manner?
No, it does not.
Thank you.
I did have a question, kind of taking off of Councilmember Steinmetz's question. When one of the reasons to initiate the Finance Committee was pretty long-term. You know, we were in the black, and then in the red, it was more like 2027 or something like that. Am I wrong? In other words, it was long range, like 2 years, 3 years out.
Right.
And so are we not going to be forecasting like 3 and 4 years out anymore? We'll just, we will still
Yeah,
be
it would still be a
forecasting
five-year
5 years
financial
out.
forecast, yeah.
Okay, good. We've just been talking about,
Right.
the next year, so I wanted to clarify that. Thank you. All right, if there are no further questions, Councilmember Oxiger, since you did already kind of start the motion, I will go ahead and let you finish. Go ahead, repeat it.
Yes.
Please. Thank you.
I move to pass draft ordinance number 24-016 to a second reading on March 28th, 2024 for further city council consideration.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll give this to Deputy Mayor Steinmetz on that one. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, I think I'm going to go down the line like this. I'll start with Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
I would defer to the maker of the motion to go first.
Okay. Councilmember Oxiger.
Yes, I would just, as the finance director indicated, this is a substantial change, and this, I think, is in particular, we're not talking about something that we will probably be revisiting, anytime soon. So I think making sure that the public has adequate chance to weigh in on this is extremely important, and so that's why I'm requesting the 2-week delay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I think this is exactly why we should have second readings. It's a substantial change in procedures. I do think that the city needs the opportunity to weigh in. I think the citizens need the opportunity to weigh in. And frankly, it takes some time to digest. I'm sure Jeff understands all of this, right off the bat, but I don't. I'm just a lawyer. This is not my forte, but I do think that moving this to a second reading is appropriate, and so I would support the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahoney, and then Councilmember Nunny.
Yeah, I the only thing is, and you kind of alluded to it, I support doing this on March 28th. I would love to see then kind of a little bit more detailed list of the touch points. I think, like I said, one of the perceived things is there's not the touch points to look at where we are and make adjustments. So examples, there would be, 11 finance committee meetings. There would be, 3 meetings or 2 meetings with Citizens Advisory Committee, a couple of those things. So everybody gets to see how many times we're going to touch or look at this budget, mark the progress, discuss changes and so forth. Just be nice to have an inventory of those types of dates.
All right, Councilmember Nunny.
I just wanted to say that, thank you, Jeff. He took the time, I'm sure he talked to everybody, but he took the time to talk to me late in the afternoon. And all of my questions were addressed at that time. And also, all the questions were addressed in the presentation. So, great presentation. I do support moving it to the 28th again for the same reason. It's a huge change in policy. It's something we haven't addressed in a very long time in this city, and hearing from the citizens would be good. If there's any opposition or in favor of, love to hear from anybody. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. I obviously support second readings basically all the time. I supported this. I've wanted this for years and years for different reasons, but rhetorically, I just spent a lot of time in Olympia the last couple of months, and they have biennial budgeting, and it is essentially just another opportunity, just to go to town on getting 400 things passed. So a biennial budget in itself it provides absolutely no. This is another flavor of the discussion we just had regarding the city manager. We have had the financial controls that the council has wanted. I've lived here long. I can't think of a budget in the last 15 years that I've looked at that could be understood without just a lot more study than the public. And so if you put last year's budget, you put last year's budget book in front of the Citizens Advisory Committee, and they'll just go, oh, impressive. It does not provide the drill down that the public will be able, that a layperson will be able to understand what they're looking at and where you could make meaningful improvements. It's just not meant for that at the current time. And so I'm supporting this and have for a while, and it's, I'll be frank, I'm sorry, this is a Hail Mary for me to get to a level of detail in financial reporting that you can show to a well-educated average person, and they will get what's going on so they can make meaningful contributions to how we might change our priorities. And another thing, you know, this council, and I've talked to people on the council going back decades, and the one thing everyone agrees on is that we have swung back and forth. We basically changed spending priorities. It's like the site-specific zoning. I can't remember living here where we have had a true plan and discipline. There's always some event, like every year or two, and you can say, oh yeah, there was this thing and that thing, but it happens so often, and you have to be able to say, wait a minute, man. You know, if you keep swinging back and forth all the time, you know, maybe you need to, you know, go to a meeting. I mean, so this for me is, I'm hoping that the Finance Department will use this to help us enact the discipline and the information that we should have, but it's going to be up to the council to either take advantage of this gift or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move forward? Okay, well, I would like to say I appreciate this so much, Jeff. This came out of the Finance Committee, which came out of, you know, a little bit of red in our forecasts. And I do remember saying, okay, what do you got? What can we do? And so with your experience and background, and you come to the table with some very tangible solutions moving forward to solve that, I'm going to listen to every single thing. And so when you come forward with this and you come forward with improved reporting, you know, to tag on to what Councilmember Mahoney talked about, touch points, maybe if you put in, say, we are going to move forward with that. That would be helpful. If we're going to eliminate 1 year, this improving the reporting, you know, kind of answers the transparency question, I think, for people. And maybe if there's a 1 or 2 times, say, this is reporting day for the council, or a reporting touch point for the council, something like that would be helpful. So thank you for the problem solving. Appreciate it. I am also, well, I'm done with that comment. Anything else? Okay, well, let's take it to a vote about moving it to March 28th. All in favor, raise your right hand. And we have a unanimous vote, 7-0. Awesome. All right, Jeff, thank you. Then the next thing we have on the agenda is a discussion of the levy lid lift. The purpose of this item is for it's informational purposes for the City Council. No motion will be required. No action will happen. This is a briefing. So I'll hand it over to our Finance Director, Jeff Friend.
Thank you. So property tax levy lid lifts. This is a topic I think that was showed up informally among staff last year during the budget discussion and then found its way into the Finance Committee. We discussed this last week. And then this, as was stated, this is really meant to be an informative, educational presentation, but at the same time, we are also looking for some council direction in the form of what might go on the ballot if the council was to pass an ordinance to place a ballot measure on the ballot. So property tax levy lid lifts. So with property tax, as stated here, every year we issue the council adopts a property tax levy. It is our top revenue source. And there's certain rules, regulations related to property tax levies. So as stated on this slide, a lot of this information comes from the Municipal Services Research Center. Taxing districts with a population of 10,000 or more may not increase the total levy amount collected from current assessed valuation by more than 1% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. So when we work on the property tax levy and we want to increase it, we can increase it either by the rate of inflation or 1%, whichever is lower. Even if the inflation is lower and we want 1%, we can do an extra ordinance claiming a special need and do what's called taking the 1%. But we can also not take a 1% and not increase it, and that's also an option. So then, which relates to the next point, there's two ways to increase property tax levies more than the 1%. And the first one is called banked capacity. So if you have a year where you don't increase your property tax levy by 1%, that dollar amount the county banks. And so maybe 5 years down the road, you think, oh, wow, I really need to, increase property tax levy. You can use that dollar amount to increase your property tax levy. It's called using your banked capacity. And we actually did that for the 2024 levy. The second way to increase your property tax levies more than 1% is called a levy lid lift. And so that's what this presentation is about this evening. So what is a levy lid lift? So a taxing jurisdiction that is collecting less than its maximum statutory levy rate may ask a simple majority of voters to lift the total levy amount collected by more than 1%. The new levy rate cannot exceed the maximum statutory rate. So the property tax levy, there's a lot of calculations that the county provides. One of those is called your maximum statutory rate. You can't go above that. We're nowhere near that. So that's not too much of a concern, but a levy lid lift, a simple majority of voters, if it's on the ballot, they pass with approve the lift by a simple majority, more than 50%, then we can lift that. We can raise the amount of the property tax levy by whatever is stated in the ballot measure. There's 4 types of levy lid lifts. There's really 2 variables here, how long it is and is it temporary or permanent. So you have a single-year temporary, single-year permanent, multi-year temporary, and multi-year permanent. So when it refers to years as single-year or multi-year, that's really not how long it lasts. That's how many times you're going to increase the levy rate. So in the single year, and we'll see an example here, you raise it in the first year, and then maybe it's temporary, maybe it's permanent after that. Multi-year, you have up until 6 years, where each of those 6 years you can raise the rate however you desire, as long as it's under the maximum statutory rate. So we're going to look at why a levy lid lift. So the 101% limit obviously restricts revenue growth, especially for jurisdictions that are heavily dependent on property taxes and whose costs are increasing by more than 1% per year due to inflation, salary and benefits costs, and other factors. So that relates to the city of Des Moines because property tax is Des Moines' largest revenue source. And the general fund expenditures have been increasing by more than 1%. So from 2021 to 2022, general fund expenditures grew 6%. And from 2022 to 2023, they grew 13%. And the contributors to that increase would be what was described above, inflation and salary and benefits costs. So we're going to take a look at some graphs that explain the different types of levy lid lifts. So this is a single year temporary levy lid lift. So the bars, the blue, is what your property tax levy would be without any increases. It would just be your normal levy increasing year by year with the 1%. The green shows the addition. So you can see in that third bar, it says one-time bump. So that makes it a single year, exceeds the 1% annual limit. So maybe this, on this chart, that could represent like 6% increase. Then afterwards, you resume your 1% annual increase for a number of years specified in your ballot measure. So in this case, that's 4 years, and so it's going to go up the 1% based on that increased amount for the next 4 years, and then it stops, and then you're back into the blue. And so you can see that second arrow on the one on the right says levy, cliff, levy. Levy reverts to what it would have been without the lid lift, so that's a cliff. If you're familiar with the term fiscal cliff, this is a levy cliff, so that ends. Typically, this kind of a temporary levy lid lift that has a cliff like that, I think it's typically used when, say, a city, municipality, or taxing jurisdiction wants to fund, say, a project. So, hey, we want to build a bridge, we want to pay for it over 5 years, you know, we'll put out a property tax increase levy, and we'll do it, and then it'll end and things will go back to normal when the project is done. Single year permanent levy lid lift, you see this is similar, so it has that one-time bump on that third bar. So maybe they increase their property tax by 3% instead of 1%. And then you can see going forward, it's always going to have the 1% annual increase, and it doesn't expire. So you add it for that first year, and then going, you know, forward, it's always there, and it's always based on that original increased amount. Multi-year temporary levy lid lift. So this is not single year. So you have your initial bump on the third bar that exceeds your 1% limit. So again, maybe this is 3%. And then you have, in this graph, you have the next 4 years. And that maybe in year 2, it's 6%, maybe in year 3 is 7%. You know, it can vary. Typically, I think you would index it to inflation. You wouldn't just willy-nilly raise rates or whatever you want to do. And then you can see it's temporary. So again, it ends, and at the end, you're back to where you would have been at the beginning. And then finally, you have the multi-year permanent levy lid lift. So this is the same thing. Except you can see that it does not end, it does not have a levy cliff, but once that first period is finished, you go back to your 1% annual increases at the end of the chart. So the question, as I said, is the variables are how many years can you raise your rate over 1%? That determines if it's single year or multi-year. And then the second question is this going to be permanent or just temporary? So you match up those two variables, and that determines what form of levy lid lift you have. So ballot measure requirements. One question that did come up during the discussion was how much it would cost to put a ballot measure on the ballot, and we do have a definitive answer now from King County. And the answer is it would cost in the range between $42,000 and $62,000, and the pamphlet would be like $2,000. I believe the variance is due to the size and amount of words, you know, that you're going to be printing in your ballot measure. So each, if you have single year or multi-year, there's slightly different ballot measure requirements. So a single year lid lift ballot measure must state the maximum tax rate to be imposed in the first year. And so that rate would be, you know, phrased as $1.50 per thousand of assessed value. So whatever rate you have, it's always going to be a dollar amount per $1,000 of assessed value. If it's temporary, you have to state the total duration of the levy, the number of years it lasts. If it's permanent, you state that it is permanent or that the dollar amount of the levy will be used for the purpose of computing the limitations for subsequent levies. And then finally, state the exemption for senior citizens and persons with disabilities under RCW 84.36.381, if the jurisdiction wishes to exempt these individuals. Okay, what you don't have to state on your ballot measure for a single-year lid lift is the purpose, although doing so is a good idea. And the reason for that, discussing this with our bond counsel, whose firm also works on levy lid lifts, when I started working on this and trying to look at the rates, I was kind of focused like, well, the rate increases might be a big deal, and the feedback I've gotten and with conversation with others is not so much the rate increase, is for what the rate increase is for. So it's always a good idea to put the purpose on there so that the voters know what they're going to be paying for. So, so though you don't have to state it, it's always a good idea to do so. The increase in the levy rate is also, you don't have to state it with a single year lid lift. For instance, an increase of 20% or 20 cents per thousand, although some jurisdictions do. The maximum total levy amount, for instance, a total levy amount of $300,000, you don't have to state what that is. It would be difficult depending on the election that you're participating in if you don't have the information anyway. Okay, ballot measure requirements, multi-year. So a multi-year lid lift ballot measure must state the total levy duration. So if you're doing multi-year, I think you have up to 6 years. You have 5 additional, but maybe you just want to do a multi-year of 3, multi-year of 4. If it's permanent, state that it is permanent, or that the dollar amount of the levy will be used for the purpose of computing the limitations for subsequent levies. Next point is state the maximum tax rate to be collected in the first year. For instance, $1.50 per thousand. So this is very similar to what we just looked at. You state the limit factor to be used for all subsequent years, stated as an annual % increase or inflation index. The amounts do not need to be the same for each year. So you can say in your second year, we're going to increase it 3% or the lower of inflation. In year 3, we're going to do like 2% and lower of inflation. You can raise it as long as you state the limit factor. State the exemption for senior citizens and persons with disabilities under the RCW if the jurisdiction wishes to exempt these individuals. The ballot measure cannot state the maximum levy rate for subsequent years after the first year. So examples of levy lid lifts from the past 5 years. There's 3 municipalities that did levy lid lifts with property tax. One is our neighbor, Normandy Park, in November of 2021. They passed a multi-year permanent. Their levy rate is $1.60 per thousand of assessed value, and it passed with 67% of the vote. Shoreline did one the following year, November of 2022. They also did a multi-year permanent. Their levy rate that they sought was $1.39 per thousand of assessed value. It passed with 62.84%. And then Maple Valley last year did a single year permanent. Their levy rate was $1.18 per thousand of assessed value. It passed with 65.65%. That does not guarantee that if we do one, it's going to pass. Those passed. And talking with the chief, he's had experience with a property tax levy lid lift that has passed in Redmond and failed in Redmond. Which option is best? It depends on how much money the taxing district needs to raise. So that probably is related to the purpose of which you're raising the money. So if you're doing it for a project, maybe you only need $5 million. If you have a long-term budget shortfall, maybe you need an annual amount to aid the budget. What the revenue is needed for, which I just alluded to, and for how long, for instance, continued operating costs versus a capital project that will only last a few years, how quickly the taxing district's costs and property values are increasing, the desired election date, special, primary, or general, and how it's perceived that voters will respond to the different alternatives, for instance, a permanent versus a temporary tax. So based on the 2023 property tax levy, we'll take a look at the impact of a higher rate would have had we had a levy lid lift hypothetically last year. So for the 2023 property tax levy, it was a little over 5.5, almost $5.6 million. Our levy rate was at a bit over 90 cents per thousand. So you can see on this chart above, $1.10, the levy would have been about $6.8 million, an increase of about $1.2 million. If we had gone with $1.40, you know, our levy would have been for over $8.6 million and would have increased what we received by over a little bit over $3 million. That's the impact to the city, but there's also the impact to the property taxpayer. This chart shows the property, various property values, what was paid based on our levy rate by the taxpayer, and we're using $1.35 for a suggested rate, and we're showing the increase to the property tax bill. So if you have $1 million house, the increase to $1.35 from about 90 cents would be about $447 annually. If you're at 400,000, that increase would be about $179. And then if your property was valued at 1.6 million, the annual increase to your tax bill would be $716. So the median property value in the city is about $521,000. So the recommendation, this is just informational, and we are looking for direction on certain items, but we do have our own, I would say, hopes or biases. From the financial perspective, we see the best option to be a permanent levy lid lift. We don't see the sense in doing a levy lid lift and doing it for a temporary amount of time and then winding back where we started. The election that we're looking at is the August election. There's the reasons for that is, one, that's within budget season, so at least in August we'll know if we're going to have that additional revenue or not. So we'll know if we need to cut services or we'll have additional revenue. And also, it's a federal election in November. There's going to be a lot of items on the ballot, so the thinking is we can avoid some of the competition and have a little bit more focus in the August election. On the levy rate, we are suggesting $1.35, at least as a minimum. And then single year or multi-year, we'd prefer a multi-year permanent. But I'm the finance guy, I know numbers. Council, you guys know elections. So I would rather pass a single year that, have a single year pass than have a multi-year fail. But we do prefer the multi-year permanent levy lid lift. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Jeff. If I could just add a couple things. So our 2024 budget has been adopted. We met our reserves, our 16.67 reserves. Looking forward, as we forecasted into 2025, without doing anything, we're not going to meet those reserves based on our expenditures and our revenue. That's just not going to happen. So this is a tool that will help us meet that. So as we talked about this, and it wasn't mentioned there, but it was mentioned in public comment, and we've been talking about it throughout the entire process, is that we would propose a narrow scope for the use of these funds. So at this point, it's public safety. We are working to create basically link some positions that we can basically say that this is what this money will fund. And so we want to keep it at a narrow scope, and that's something that we'll be developing as we move forward towards if we do adopt this ordinance. Without increasing our revenue somewhere, there will be some significant budget cuts that the council will have to consider. So we're not just talking about increasing staff, we're talking about retaining existing services, but then also increasing staff. So without some money to retain existing services, we would have to make some budget cuts. I think Jeff put it well about the permanent versus temporary. The city previously passed a temporary lid lift that resulted in the city hiring a number of police officers. When the lid lift was over, they were all laid off. So that's, when you're talking about ongoing expenses, you really need to be looking at the permanent lid lift, and that's why that recommendation is being made, is so that we can retain the officers and the staff that we hire for these purposes. So that's the recommendation is for a permanent lid lift. The number that if we were to move it up to
$1.35.
$1.35, we're using that number now, and we're looking at how many positions we can retain, because we did hire police officers using ARPA money, and that money is gone. It's through the end of this year, and so without that, without finding this money somewhere, those positions won't be funded. Not that we couldn't fund them from somewhere else, but the funding that wherever that's coming from now goes away. So there's going to be a lot of considerations here if this were not to pass, or the council were to decide not to move forward with it. So those are all additional things to consider. But I wanted to get on the record that the proposal would be that this is for public safety. We would narrowly define the scope, and so that there would be a message about, if the community is willing to support this issue, they know exactly what they're getting.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll begin with questions, comments, opinions, opening up the floor. Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, City Manager George. My questions were what you just answered. To Mr. Coleman's point, having some scope and showing that it's public safety, and to retain the officers that we hired or whatnot would be the way I go. So, and multi-year, permanent.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Mahoney.
I think it's one of those things that has to be said that we're all feeling it. Public safety has been a big issue in this city. When I talk to the constituents here, we're battling some state policy changes that have honestly handcuffed our police in the execution of their duties. And personally, I've been disappointed, particularly at the court system at the felony levels. Our superior court system, where we don't seem to be getting the justice we think we should. I agree. I had the comment about those of us that supported, moving ARPA dollars to police was to add and protect our residents. There was a comment in the packet, I thought it says it all. And part of the reason we're doing this is the city's general fund expenditure increased 6% from 2021 to 2022, and another 13% from 2022 to 2023. We're facing labor cost, construction cost, interest rates, and inflation, and our revenues aren't simply coming up. What is good about this is we're going to put it in the hands of the residents of Des Moines, and they get to decide if public safety is an important issue. Obviously, if it's not, as our city manager just described, there's going to be some hard decisions that have to be made. I support the permanent levy lift in multi-year for a couple reasons, but I obviously want to hear more, and I want to see where our money goes in detail. Love to see what a salary is, what benefits are, the equipment. I know some of the things, but I think a lot of people would be interested in what a police officer costs. They bring a great value to the community. I'm not saying they're expensive or whatever, but they kind of are, but they bring a value. But I like the idea because we have had a lot of uncertainty before COVID and during COVID and now after COVID. And I like the multi-year permanent because it builds in just that element of flex and flux. I want to do this once, as you had mentioned before. We did it in a temporary version, and we kind of got back to where we need that assistance. I think of more of a permanent fix. Obviously, we're going to have to find a way that educates our public about what they're buying, because we definitely do. I agree, I don't like the competition of November election, although I like the idea of more time, but I don't think we can afford that luxury. I think we need to bring it before the audience in August, and that's my comments.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just want to talk about timing a little bit. So tonight, we're getting a general recommendation from the council on whether or not to move forward and in what capacity. We will, if the council, if there's general consensus to move this forward, we will be putting together a draft ordinance for first reading at our next council meeting on March 28th. And so we'll continue to define that scope, and we'll have more information at that meeting. We won't be asking the council to take action at that meeting. We would then set it over for a second reading on April 11th. And by that time, we should have all the information the council needs. And we would then use that information to give to King County for the ballot statement and what they need. So this will be a process that will extend at least over the next month prior to a final vote.
And can I add that the filing deadline for the August election with King County is May 3rd?
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, silliest question ever, but can you recoup your costs, your election costs in any way with said, never mind. Okay, what I would like to know is what other ancillary costs might be considered. We cannot express a position statement, but it is legal for us to send out mailers like informational type stuff?
Not the city.
Really?
Yes. I'm sorry.
We can send out informational mailers. Because this is a political issue, we can't advocate on either side, but we can provide factual information. And this is something that's been litigated and fought over for many years, so there's really kind of a template of what you can and can't do. And so the legal department will assist with that. We also have, we're using an outside law firm to help us with the ordinance and the financial issues. And they can probably provide some assistance.
But you could do a very nice four-color, multilingual, value-neutral statement of the pros and cons that would pass some sort of legal muster that you could send, out to every mailing address like we do the city currents. Is that, yes?
I believe we can provide factual information.
It has to be neutral.
Yeah. So I guess the pros and cons piece is probably what we wouldn't do, but we would say these are the facts.
Okay. Regarding like with this presentation, pass muster, just explaining that, like, for example, the median cost to the taxpayer per year, or if you have $1 million house, could you put something like that on a flyer?
Yeah, that's information that we would probably want to provide to the public, just to say, if you vote yes on this, this is the increase you would see, and then have the chart so that they could find where they're at.
Then just rhetorically, I have been talking about this for 5 years. I would strongly favor a permanent single year, and don't take this, but basically, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about that movie Ferris Bueller. There's no way you can start running down this kind of thing without sounding like line 31 referring to, Schedule C, Section 179, and so forth. The thing with the multi-year is it's just harder to explain to people. I understand there's more money involved, but we did pass one in 2006, and the ordinance is literally a one-sentence benefit statement, and then it failed previously, and just anything that can make this simple, even at the cost of a certain amount of money. The main thing is that I think you put it really well, just describing it as it should have been permanent back then because it's structural revenue, and but the added benefit of the multi-year, I'm just, because I've seen them fail here, I'd be willing to sacrifice a little bit of money for something that just has clarity and you can put on a flyer and everybody gets it. But I'll just end by saying I wish we had that benefit statement tonight. Because it really is, it's just we need to retain officers. We've been using one-time money, and that wasn't supposed to, sorry, but that was supposed to have ended years ago, but we've continued to do it, and darn it, now we're finally going to solve that problem. And I wish there had been, that had been in the presentation, and I'm done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine why anybody would do a temporary levy lift for an ongoing expense. That just seems like fiscal craziness to me. You know, so I think the idea, and I'm hearing a consensus, at least up here, that it needs to be a permanent lift. And then whether it's single year or multi-year, you know, our issues are somewhere down the road, multiple years out. And so I think we need to address that now. So it seems to me the sensible thing to do is to, if we're going to ask the taxpayers to do this once. Let's do a multi-year lift. And so that's what I would ask the ordinance come back with, because I think that is the logical and sensible thing based upon all the information that we had coming out in last year's budget, even, you know, up until tonight. We've heard what it's going to take to try to provide this community with quality public safety, and that's what it's about. It's about how many police officers you want, how they're going to get prosecuted, how they're going to get jailed, you know, but when you add more officers, there's always something down the road. And so there's a bow wave when officers are doing their job, and we need them to do their job in this community, and I've heard that over and over again, and we just need more officers to do that. So I'd ask you to come back with a multi-year permanent levy lift. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember Oxger, and then I'll take you for a second time. Councilmember Oxger.
The one thing I would say on this is that I don't know if anybody else on the council has run one of these campaigns. I've run 4 of them, and it is critical. The default position on any tax increase is no. And so it's incredibly critical that we be as transparent as possible. We give the public enough time to interact, because if there's any feeling that we're trying to push something under the table on them, they're going to vote no. So as we consider this over the next couple of weeks, we should be, really reaching out and making sure that people have an opportunity to weigh in on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris, your second time.
I believe it will be essential. I hope there is support to put those senior and disability exemptions on the ballot explicitly. I think that will be a tremendous concern from the public, and again, I think that the multi-year will be confusing to people. I agree with Councilmember Oxiger. This community, I believe it will pass, but it needs to be in order to sell it, it needs to be simple, and I have seen these things go down in flames, and people have been told for years, sorry, Ken, we were told how we were fully staffed for a long time, and that just meant we weren't running shifts shorthanded. And now you've got to tell people they will not exactly be thrilled, a certain number of the public, and so simple is better, and definitely make it clear that seniors and disabled and vets and so on can obtain relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I do have a few questions. When you come back, is there an ability to estimate the number of officers? Somehow, maybe even the next couple of years, maybe not 5, like if we pick one of these, how many officers that might mean for us? Is there an ability to do that?
Yeah, we're working on that now. And I think one other thing I want to add when we're just talking about officers, at least one of the positions that we funded through ARPA is for our mental health social worker that works out on the streets in partnership with our police officers. That has really been a vital position, and it's something that not every city has. And it allows us to respond with a professional dealing with people in crisis rather than having a police officer there. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that we'll be advertising, but this is not just adding more cops. This is kind of a comprehensive public safety approach that has been very successful, and we'd like to build on that. We'd like to retain what we have, and we'd like to build on that.
Yeah, I'd also add, as mentioned in the packet, that as far as you can raise the rate, but it's more art than science, because the revenue you're generating is based on assessed value, and assessed value can go up and it can go down. So that has to be kept in mind. It's not really, we plug in this rate, we're gonna get this amount. But it might be close, it might be over, it might be less, depending on how that assessed value moves. I think it was a couple of years ago, assessed value went up 1 year to the next $1 billion as far as what the city was valued at. So, because the real estate market was hot at that time. So it's been steady since, but I just wanted to reinforce the idea that it is a little bit more art than science.
Mm-hmm. But art's better than nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about putting some boundaries around the funding. You know, you talked about the option of not telling people what it's for, but we want to do that. When the revenue comes in, will it be restricted? Is there a way to say this is the amount of money that the levy was for, and then when we receive that, are they restricted funds that go into a pot?
Yeah, I'm researching the accounting treatment for that now.
Okay.
So hopefully I'll have an answer for you by the next reading.
Okay.
I think it's a little easier if it was for a capital project, and we can say, well, this is for the project, it's set aside. But because those funds come into the general fund where public safety resides,
right,
then it kind of, you know, there's a little blending in there. So I'm just trying to make sure that if we need to set it aside or account for it as separate, that we do that, so that the public knows that we are dedicating it.
Thank you. What were the other levies, you know, Normandy Park, Shoreline, were those all public safety levies as well? They all passed probably a pretty significant margin?
I know Normandy Park was. Actually, on the last election, I opened up my voter guide to that page. So I was like, well, that's a sign. But that was, and I think our chief has talked to their chief about that particular levy lid lift. I'm not certain about the other two, if they were specifically for
It's just a nice, it's a nice message to know that other communities around are, it's like everybody, if you could say, almost everybody is passing their public safety levies. When you're considering this failure of HB 2211, right? I think cities are leaning on this.
I think so. I was going to backtrack on Normandy Park. I think their language was actually more aimed at parks, public safety, a little bit more all-encompassing of their services, as an example. But yeah, I would agree.
Okay. And this is kind of a comment or a partially a question, kind of taking on to Councilmember Harris's question recommendation about a flyer. If we could, would it be possible to use currents instead, since it goes into every single household? If the information was legal, for lack of a better term, could we use currents to put out information about this?
Yeah, that's something we would research. I believe we might be limited to the number of communications we can put out, but that's something, yeah, I think it was one. So if we did a mailer, it would go to every household. If it was in the currents, it would go to every household.
And we're already paying for currents.
So, but that's something that, you know, this is a buildup. So this is, you know, tonight we're talking about, you know, kind of moving on to the next step. And that's a step that will be a little bit later in the process.
Okay. So for the reasons mentioned already, I'm in favor of something permanent because this is operations. It's not a capital project. I'm definitely in favor of the multi-year because not only people right now would like more officers, but we need to cover 3 positions at least, right? 2 officers and a behavioral health, our GPS team person, just with ARPA that's going away. So I think over the next year, we need to be able to, in another couple of years, add something else and something else. So I think that our community doesn't want to, it's my feeling, doesn't want to just make sure we don't lose anything, but also add, and we're gonna need the resource to do that. And besides, I feel like if we're going to ask the community to invest, we need something that is tangible, significant, permanent, noticeable, right? We need to make like, this is what we did for you, and it's kind of a big thing. Well, I appreciate the presentation. The graphs helped make it very clear. I appreciate the opportunity to support the community, and as I already mentioned, many cities are going to be moving forward to do this, especially with the failure of HB 2211. So those are all my comments and questions. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Next is new agenda items for consideration, and I'm wondering if you don't mind skipping that and going on to council member reports. Meeting's running long. Okay. So I'm going to move to council member reports, and Councilmember Harris, you're first.
Sure. So speaking of Olympia, SB 5955 has, the port package update bill has passed, and as of today, there's about $10.5 million allocated for the program if you have a failing sound insulation system. This is a 5-year program to evaluate homes and figure out who should go first. But in a, at the moment, $5.5 million is allocated for an assessment phase to decide who is worthy and who goes first. More than half of the money is to do this evaluation before you can get to actually fixing a small number of people's homes. Hopefully that will increase and we can improve the program. But it's striking because there's another airport, San Francisco, that has a program, and they spent $500,000 in creating a program and then used the rest of it to actually provide updates. So I'm tired like everybody else, but I'll just say that you've seen 3 votes tonight where, or not votes, but issues discussed where it really is the council. sorry, but I get this thing about why are you being scoldy and so forth. I come from a culture of accountability. I was struck when I moved here that people talk about, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. You were lauded for speaking truth to power. Here, you really work hard not to hurt people's feelings, to not speak directly. I do not consider the tenure of our last city manager to be a roaring success. Otherwise, we would not be having the discussions we are currently having. We are dealing with, staff changes and all kinds of stuff, and you can either look at these things as being heroic, like when we have an ice storm and, people have to work 24/7 to all hands on deck and so forth. When a company is running smoothly, you have these bumps and stuff, but basically it's not all hands on deck all the time. And I'm sorry, but it's been that way like almost every year since I've lived here. There's just always this sense of just kinetic stuff. And success would be that you turn the keys over to the next person and you say, well, thanks. Looks like the donut shop is going along okay. But the fact that we're having to make these kinds of decisions, it means that they're really signals. And that to me, I always come back to the financial reporting thing, because I was struck by all the talk about communications. The things that people want for new communication, it's like $1 million for the communications improvements that people want. And I'm like where? In my couch cushions? I mean, so the time to talk about better communications was 6-7 years ago. And if we had not cut out the new items for consideration, I was about to suggest that we reinstate Zoom. We had remote meetings, which doubled public participation. And then the moment that the pandemic emergency ended, we dumped it. We had it. And the council of the time chose to reduce public engagement dramatically. So I'm just like, this is not a question of, giving people information. You have the amount of communication and public engagement that your council wants at the present time. We want public safety, so we're willing to ask you to pay for it. Other stuff, you're being asked to pay for what we value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple quick things. If you're interested in the parade that we have on the third Saturday of July, we need volunteers for the parade committee. Sorry to steal your thunder, Council or Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, but in that regard, but we're going to need them. I also volunteer in that committee, and it's a great event for the community. Last Friday, I attended the grand opening of the Veterans Center at Highline College. It's great to see them recognized and so forth. And it's going to be a great weekend out there. First one we call legitimately this year, where it's supposed to reach 70 degrees. Enjoy Des Moines. And sometimes people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Thank you. That's all I got.
I have no report at this time.
No report or comments. Thank you.
Yes. On Tuesday, I attended the Senior Services Advisory Committee on behalf of Councilmember Grace Matsui. Because of the ongoing water damage repair at the Activity Center, the committee met at the Adriana. It was indicated that this could be the part of an effort to promote interest in, by bringing the committee to the people that it serves. Approximately 9 guests showed up, which may bode well for the committee's efforts to recruit new members. There is no set date for the reopening of the activity center, as was stated earlier. The committee's semi-annual shredding event, sponsored again by the Senior Services Advisory Committee, will be on April 24th at the Activity Center, and it was noted that the Arts Commission will be hosting its annual egg hunt at the Beach Park Meadow on Saturday, March 30th from 9 to 11 a.m. April 3rd will be Kids Takeover Day for city employees. It's basically a take your kid to work, although there was some discussion about some of the older staff members. They may have kids that are 30, 40 years old, but as I understand, they can come too.
That's fine, yeah. Grandkids, great-grandkids. No, we're really excited about this day.
Okay, and then concerning the communication study, there was interest expressed in offering suggestions on how to best provide input on how seniors prefer to receive information. And there were also some concerns about access of the Metro shuttle to the activity center. So those are things that they'll be talking about. On a more personal note, last fall, nearly 2/3 of our voters elected me to a third term as a Des Moines Pool Metropolitan Park District Commissioner. There are instances in which City Council members may simultaneously serve as Park District Commissioners. Last week, a King County Superior Court judge ruled that such an instance does not apply in my case, and that I had to make a decision either to give up my position as a pool commissioner or to give up my seat on the Des Moines City Council. Regardless of whether I agree with his opinion, we are a nation of laws, and the court has spoken. Last Friday, as I did not have the money to appeal the judge's ruling, I chose to step down from the pool board. I will point out that the judge observed that the case in hand is dealing in hypotheticals. There are no allegations, assertions, or claims that Oxiger has done anything other than what he believes to be in the best interest of the public and his constituents. No evidence has been presented that any of the above scenarios have or will occur. The concern is that they could, and without authority permitting an alternative, a judgment of ouster under RCW 7.56.100 appears to be the only course of action. I decided to remain on the City Council because I ran on a platform to support our kids and working families. We are dealing with severe financial issues, and protecting the programs we offer through our Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services Department must be a priority. We are selecting new administrative leadership who, I hope, will value our youth and nurture their development as our parents nurtured ours. I resigned as a pool commissioner with the confidence that the pool district leadership remains in the hands of commissioners who agree that swimming is an essential life skill and a gateway to tremendous recreational and career opportunities for the next generation. I have pledged to them my continued support for their mission and will do everything I can to help when called upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Well, I had a busy week or more. I attended the Sound Cities Association PIC, or Public Interest Committee, last night, and we had presentations on two major issues that are going forward in King County. One is the funding and creation of a crisis care center network, which is focused on mental health. There will be 5 centers throughout King County in various districts, and they're hoping to get the whole system up and running by 2032. The idea is to create a place where it's safe to go, somewhere safe for somebody that's having a mental health crisis to go, that isn't an ER and it isn't a jail, because those are the only really alternatives that exist for most people. They're projecting that they'll be able to serve 14,000 people per center per year at various levels of care, from just a walk-in kind of an urgent care type of situation to an involuntary commitment. Secondly is that the Regional Wastewater Services Plan is being renewed, that they have not had a major update to that plan since 1999. Since then, they told us that the population of King County that they're serving has increased by about 500,000 people, and that by 2050 there'll be another 750,000 people in King that they will be serving. As a consequence, probably your sewer fees are going to go up. There's been a lot of discussion about rate equity. So, you know, why are the people, you know, in Covington paying for something that's happening up in Lake Forest Park? Two very different, and that conversation is ongoing. But the director thought that it probably balances out in the long run. They are doing things to enhance their revenue. For example, they've been recovering biogas apparently since 1987 and selling that. And now they're looking into using sewer heat recovery in order to generate energy. There's also things that they're doing to control the source of the contamination that gets into the wastewater. In particular, they want to focus on upstream, kind of like we heard tonight. If you don't put it in, it doesn't come out down there. So we had a particularly long discussion about PFAS, which is still something that is undefined, but it's a chemical that gets in the water, and prescription drugs. People are still dumping them in their toilet, down the sink, and that shows up later in the water, and they just don't have the technology to filter that kind of stuff out. So just a little public service announcement, please. Don't put it in there. Secondly is we had a meeting with the South Sound Fire Department. Mayor Buxton and I did with Chief Dave Van Valkenburg and Deputy Chief Lisa Denenbaugh. They really want to engage with the city and dialogue and plan for the future. We had a good talk about downtown and where that might be going and what you know, the fire needs might be and how that could figure into it, as well as other parts of the city. And they want to be engaged. They want to be a good partner to work with us. Wow, it gets long. And I went to the SCA networking dinner, and I met with Des Moines, or DDM, because I'm the liaison on that. And I hope that we can remain focused on the future and fixing the issues we have now, and keep that forward-looking and move this city forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate it. Your council's hard at work. Appreciate them all. The last couple weeks, I've had a lot of fun with the community, different community members, a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people want to meet and talk and let us know what they think. And I enjoy these conversations, even if people are anxious about what might be happening. So really enjoyed my time, and thank you for reaching out. I appreciate it. Visited several businesses in town recently, just talking about city currents and ways that they can, and also ways they can get more engaged and communicate with the public. I attended a land stewardship event, which was kind of cleaning up some of our urban forest areas, taking out invasives, and I see one of my partners in crime over here, Barbara McMichael, was there with her boots pulling vines off trees. Then some of you might have heard, you know, we've got some homelessness stress going on in the region, and I had a South County Mayor's meeting on Tuesday, and the thing that mostly impressed me as these mayors got together in South County is the point wasn't just as much anger and frustration as how can we get together, talk about this, negotiate, compromise, and come to a mutually satisfying conclusion, right? Like, let's do some kind, respectful problem solving. I appreciated the attitude so much. This week I attended a Be Loud. The King County Sexual Assault Resource Center had their annual Be Loud breakfast, and the stories were moving, inspiring, heartrending. But coming up, King County Sexual Assault Awareness Month will be coming up in April, so this is a fabulous organization to support. If you just type in KSARC, K-S-A-R-C, you can donate online. And coming up, there's a chat with me at the Woodmount Library next Tuesday, 6 p.m. It's free, accessible on a bus line, south end of town. So hope to see you there. Also on 3/20, there's March 20th is a multicultural night at Pacific Middle School at 5 p.m. and I've been to those before. They are so fun. There's all sorts of different food you can try, and people dance and sing and do all. You just get exposed to a whole bunch of cultures all in one big place, and so it's a community event. Come out and see. On the 23rd, Judson Park is having their pancake breakfast. It's also a community event, supports their benevolence fund, and their theme is pajamas. So come in your PJs. Bring your kids. It's only $10 for 10 and under, $15 for anyone else. So that sounds like it's going to be a fun time. And 3/17 is St. Patrick's Day. And I have an Irish heritage, so, well, me lads and lassies, it's coming to the end of the meeting. You be forgiving me, my brogue, me granddad left the homeland long ago. But I'd like to leave you with this Irish blessing. May the road rise to meet you. Next meeting I'll be in a wee bit of days on 28th of March, and this be the place. I'll be asking you to be picking up your things afore you be leaving. And now, me lad, hear us. Would you be liking to move to end the meeting?
Sure. I move to, yeah.
Sorry to catch you off guard like that.
No, that's really good. Yeah, top shelf. I move to adjourn the March 14th meeting of the Des Moines City Council.
Second by Council Deputy Mayor Steinmetz. Oh, all in favor? Ignore that. Okay, it looks like it's unanimous. Thanks.